What's up, and welcome back to Gabe of Miller Music. Today I want to show you two ways that I've been using the MPC One for live performance, and neither of them are probably in the way you might expect to see a device like the MPC One used. In both my capacity as a solo artist and as a band member, I've had to get creative with problem solving and do my best to use the gear I already have. And in two cases, the MPC One has come in clutch because of its innate features, even though I'm not really using it in exactly the way it was intended. So first of all, let me show you how I've been using it to extend my Novation Circuit live sets and why that's even a thing I would need to do. All right, so this is the setup. And the reason for this is that the Novation Circuits work in packs. So you have a pack that contains a bunch of projects that contain a bunch of sounds and patterns. And those packs are full of sounds and projects, and they can fill up. So once you've hit your limit of 2 pages worth of projects, and once you've filled up all your sample slots or all your sample and synth patch slots on the circuit tracks, you're full. Like, you can't go anywhere else from that. So in the first live set that I ever made with my dual Novation Circuit setup, I'm calling it Circuit Set 1.0, I filled up everything. Like, there are some synth slots left, but every sample slot, every project slot was full. And that was about 1 hour and 15 minutes of music if I play it completely start to finish, which is pretty good. But if I ever want to integrate new material, it would be very tough to kind of untangle everything I had built up. It would be very tough to go delete stuff and then add other stuff in and build something that still works. So really, my only good option for new material is just start a whole new live set. So that's 2.0. So it is not remotely full yet. I've got quite a bit more I can add to it. And this is about 45-ish minutes of music when it's all played through, which is not enough to fill an hour time slot. So what am I to do? Because to switch between packs takes time. And I'll show you that in a second. You'll see it when I do it. Like, if I press this, these will not be playing, they'll just be switching. And I can't stop the flow of music because the whole idea is that this sounds to the audience like a DJ set where it's continuous and flowing. Enter the MPC One. Because if I could somehow switch between projects and have music continue to play, then that unlocks a ton of flexibility for me. I can jump between different packs to play, like cherry pick different material for my different projects and still keep the flow of music going. And I could even do that multiple times if I wanted to. I am trying to keep this setup simple. So some people might jump to like, oh, you could like run clock from a device like the MPC One to the circuit or something. And I don't want to deal with that. Like, I want to be able to change tempo on the device directly. And so I'm keeping this as simple as possible. So here's what the setup is. I've gone over my dual Novation Circuit setup, so I'm not going to dwell on that here. The outputs of my circuit rhythm, which are like the primary device, are going into the inputs of the MPC One, in stereo in this case. And then the outputs of my MPC One would go to the mixer and like the PA. So what you're going to hear here is all coming out of my MPC One. So I've got a track set up here, an audio track. This guy. And you can see the bouncing waveform of the circuit audio appearing in here in stereo. So I have monitoring turned on, and I have my audio in set to inputs 1 and 2. I also have on here, just on the master, a limiter. And that's kind of nice to have. It's something I always wanted to have on my circuits that I couldn't necessarily have. Like, there's a built-in compressor here, but you don't really get any control over it. So having an extra limiter to catch peaks is kind of nice. What I can also do, and this is just a nice side benefit, is I could also say, bring in an EQ and put it before the limiter. That way, if I need to make adjustments to the overall tonality of my set on the fly, I can. And actually, I very recently played a gig in a really echoey environment where I had some weird resonances with a couple of like my kick drums and rumbles, and I found myself making EQ adjustments on the fly based on how stuff was sounding in the room. And that was really, really useful, and is another kind of accidental benefit of running everything through the MPC One. But here's the main reason I wanted to use the MPC One, is that I can set up a little bit of music as a transitional track. And I don't want to sync anything, so instead I'm going to start just bringing in something with no pulse, just some synth drones. And then once I drop out the circuit stuff, I can then go to something with a pulse, keep the dance floor moving, and it's long enough to be a full section of music that I'm happy to play for an audience that will give these guys time for me to switch packs, and then I can go back to this and bring in the circuits. That requires me to be pretty on it with my timing, where like I have to launch this like in time with what's playing on here to start, and then I have to play this in time with what this is already doing. But if I'm off by a little bit, it doesn't quite matter because I'm not trying to like beat match anything. Because the alternative to this setup is just to plug my circuits into like a pair of decks and actually beat match to what's on them. I might try that at some point, but I'm not really set up to do that. I am set up to do this because this is stuff I already had. So be it. That's what I'm going to do. So let me show you this in action. And there you go. So you'll notice the kind of dangerous thing, and actually I messed this up while recording this a couple of times and had to redo it, is I muted the audio track. So there's a little pop that happens when the projects are switched out, and so I wanted to hide that. And like overall, it's pretty seamless. It does mean there's like a little bit of that like downtime, but I tried to keep that as minimal as possible to avoid clearing the dance floor. And it's worked pretty well. The main thing that makes this work is just everything has to be in the same BPM and the same key. As long as I've got those things and as long as the vibes are somewhat compatible, I can do this as many times as I want, as long as I'm mindful of my transition points. So that's how I'm using it in a solo context. Now let's talk about in a band context. For those of you who don't know, I'm playing drums and writing songs for a band called Torment Nexus, and as part of that, we're using backing tracks and a click track because I want to do all of this extra production on top of drums, 2 guitars, bass, and vocals. Our backing tracks are very much meant to augment what we're doing live. We don't want to replace anything that we could be doing with a real musician live. So the backing tracks consist of stuff like metalcore staples, such as snare bombs and bass drops, and then a bunch of synths. So I've got synths and effects and kind of synthy drum machine intros for our songs, plus a click that we need to be able to hear and the audience shouldn't be able to hear. And as it turns out, after the MPC 3 update, the MPCs are actually pretty good at accomplishing these goals. With some trade-offs, but I'll show you those in a second. I do want to mention, though, that there are dedicated devices for doing this exact task that have a lot more ins and outs and are much more dedicated for this and can even do things like control pedals. So if you're in a fall band and you need to do some Humanity's Last Breath style automation of a pitch pedal, the MPC One is probably a bit too basic for that, but for our purposes, it's perfect. So here's what we would sound like if we do our jobs very, very well. And here's what the MPC sounds like if I just plug in the stereo outs into my audio interface. All right, so the big trade-off here, at least if I want to use just the MPC One as is that I only have 2 outputs, a left and a right. So our backing tracks have to be in mono, not in stereo. So the left channel is what goes to the PA. That's what has all the backing tracks, and that's what the audience hears. The right channel also has the backing tracks and the click. So I've just left my backing tracks straight up the middle so that part of it goes to the PA, part of it goes to us. And the click is panned hard right so that I can use the transmitter for our in-ears setup, plug it into the right output of this, and then that's what we hear. So that's fairly simple and elegant, really. So there's the exact same signal happening all at once, just we hear one aspect of it, the audience hears another. And the downside is just that the audience hears our stuff in mono, which for a live setting, I don't think is really a big deal. I think that's fine. So here's what goes to the audience just for backing tracks. And then here's what we hear. I mentioned that this only works because of the MPC 3 update. We have a lot of songs. Not a lot of songs, but a lot of audio. And that would fill up and bog down a project pretty quickly. And in fact, I tried to do that by keeping it stored just within a project. And I quickly had load times to load the project explode and take forever. And that's no good. But the MPC 3.0 update added disk streaming. So I am now streaming all of these audio tracks off of my SD card. And that's maybe a bit risky, but I've even swapped SD cards in this device and I still have it work. It took a little bit finagling, I had to tell it where to go find that same file path and those same audio files. But it works. And it means that load times on this project are very fast. And it means that the only time I really have to wait for it to figure out what the hell to do with all this audio is if I ever do a save as. You see we're on version 9 of this project file here. And this has a few benefits. For one thing, I can just do all my backtracks in my DAW properly and then load them in here. It means that like if I ever change anything, I have to reload stuff, and I've done that a bunch of times. And honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's a little annoying, but it's fine. This also means that I can give us other stuff to work with if we want it. So you'll notice these bass and guitar tracks. This guitar track doesn't do anything, but what I have it here for is a guide for the band when we're practicing. So if I'm teaching folks a new song, I can use this to pipe into our in-ears so they can hear what the guitar part is and hopefully learn it. Like we're also like writing tabs of our guitar parts and such, but this is still just an extra useful thing. And we can do that for vocals as well. Like we have a vocal guide, maybe something to help the singer keep pitch. This also means that while we don't want to replace or like layer up members who are on stage, if we are somehow down a member, like someone's sick or out of town, we're not precluded from playing a gig. For instance, pretty soon we're playing as a three-piece, just drums, guitars, and vocals. And so, hey, we can have backtracked bass and just unmute that and add it to our backing tracks. Not ideal, and of course we would prefer to like have the entire band line up, but we're going to take gigs when we can get them and just make it work. And so I have already set this up to do that. The other sneaky little benefit of using the MPC One in this case is that if the sound system at the venue is set up for this, we can actually pipe the audio from like the microphones back into the MPC, and we can use it to kind of hear ourselves. This has not always worked right. One time we did it, but just couldn't really hear the incoming audio, so it was kind of useless, and it was like an extra setup time that we needed to have spent. But when it works, I just have an audio track here that I can turn monitoring on for and then plug the output of the mixer into here. And ideally we would get like a sub mix of just like vocals, kick drum, and like guitars if they're miking up the amps. That's the ideal situation. It doesn't always work out that way. And of course, in a real ideal situation, we'd each have our own inner mixes, which is impossible with this. But we're performing on a local level. We're already putting in slightly more elaborate production than most local bands do of having like backing tracks and clicks. There's like only a few that do it. And so we're already adding a lot of production value by doing this. Oh yeah, and real quick, the other thing that the MPC 3.0 update added is just the linear timeline. So before I would have had to load these in as like the old school MPC style clips. Now I can actually jump around in the song. Super useful for practicing because it's like, hey, let's just run back this breakdown at the end here. And I can be selective about that. And that's been really useful during practice. It also means that if for some reason something went wrong during a show and like there was a technical malfunction and we're like, oh, run it back, but not from the top, I have the flexibility to do that. And I've never had this thing crash. I am so far pretty happy with how it's performed in a live situation. All I need is somewhere to plug it in. And that's the one disadvantage of using this over my MPC Live 3. But the thing is, the MPC Live 3 is expensive, it's large, it's heavy. This, I can throw in a backpack. I'm not too worried about damaging it because it's less expensive, quite frankly. Like if I had to replace it, I could, or if I had to use the MPC Live 3 instead as a contingency, I could. I can throw it in a backpack. It's pretty light. It's not going to take up a lot of space. So that's why I'm keeping this guy around for live use. If you'd like some more MPC, I've got you covered up over here. And if you'd like some more Novation Circuit, I've got you covered up over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.